Cassius Ceramix is here, and he's making his intentions known. It involves a horn, a big, loud, oddly shaped thing that I'm currently obsessed with. It even has a connection to Augustus Caesar, who would have only been about 13 at the time this book is set, but stick with me, you'll see, I'll get you there. Welcome back to Page by Toutatis, an overly thorough examination of Asterix, panel by panel, page by page, horn by horn, and we do indeed have two horns in this one. Today we're looking at the 13th page of Asterix Volume 7, Asterix and the Big Fight. I believe the first panel of this page is the first appearance of Impedimenta in the series. I looked around online to see if there was any sort of consensus on this. I saw one highly SEO'd website claiming she was in Asterix the Gaul, but I don't see that anywhere. I think this book is it, and probably this very panel. Some might argue that this is her earlier in the book over here. She has the pink dress and the blonde hair, possibly the same braids too for that hair. However, that woman is carrying a baby, and I don't think there's any record of Vitalstatistix and Impedimenta having a baby during Asterix's time. Also, that's the remastered version. If you go back a generation, you'll see that the same woman is colored in a blue dress. So, did Uderzo decide during the remastering that that was Impedimenta? Did some colorist goof that up? Or does it really even matter? Other villagers are allowed to wear pink after all, and if you look at the differences between these two panels, you'll see during the remastering process they recolored a lot of characters' clothes. The biggest difference overall between the two panels really is the way the textures are done. If you look at the tree in the background or the roofs of the buildings, we've gone from some sort of painting or airbrushing for texture to something that I guess feels more digital in a way. It's digital brushes trying to imitate the look of a watercolor or whatever style of painting, but still it's different. It's cleaner, it's clearer, it's more modern. It doesn't look as muddy, to be honest. But let's get back to what's going on in the plot over here. This is definitely Impedimenta here and now, and she's trying to get a very nervous Vitalstatistix through what's about to happen, which is his first meeting with Cassius Ceramix. This whole sequence on this top tier of panels reminds me a bit of a wedding. Here is Impedimenta in the first panel straightening Vitalstatistix's tie, or in this case his cape, the way you might expect the mother of the groom to be adjusting the tie, the bow tie on the groom's neck, you know? And then in panel 2, she's laying the cape out over the end of the shield that he's standing on, the same way someone might adjust the bride's train behind her as she's about to walk down the aisle to make it look longer and more royal and official and fancy. It's the ink line on this panel that stood out to me in a weird way. If you look at the ink line around Impedimenta, it seems just kind of thick, really bold. It's like that in the original version as well as the modern remastered edition, though, so it's not an update from the remastering. Maybe Uderzo was just being super careful to give her every possibility of standing out from the background with the thicker ink. Or maybe there was a whoopsie with the brush and he covered it up by making all the lines around her just as thick. I kind of doubt that. It's probably the former, not the latter. If you don't understand a word of what I just said, let's get back to comic basics here a little bit. A thicker line pops a character up off the page, while a thinner line sets him further back into the page. It's the same way more detail can bring an object forward, while less detail will push them back. It's basic human vision. You can see more detail in the things that are closer to you than the things off in the distance. Check out a nature painter someday to see how the backgrounds can often start looking downright impressionistic by comparison to the hyper detail of every leaf that might be on the tree in the front of the image. There's other tricks they pull. They fade out the color a little bit. The color shifts, I think, a bit to the blue the further back you get. It's beyond the scope of this presentation, but if you study the way painters work, they see light in a completely different way a lot of the times than a comic artist does, and it might be Smart for comic artists to pay a little more attention to the painters to see how they work. I know colorists definitely do because they use a lot of these tricks here, but I think a lot of them would apply to black and white line artwork as well. Anyway, when you look at the other panels on this page, or even the last page, you'll see other examples of thicker lines being used to outline characters, so it does feel like a proper stylistic technique that Uderzo was using. Maybe it just stood out more in that panel with a pink-colored character than the blue or green-toned character that you see in the rest of the village. I'm not sure, but I thought it was worth talking about for a little bit. Another great comic book art topic to discuss is the artistic tangent. It's that place where two lines accidentally meet and might cause some confusion in the head of the reader. It can really mess up the depth of the panel, and it's always inadvertent. It's the way a character's hand happens to just barely touch the panel border, for example, so it looks like they're running up against the edge of the box, when in reality it's just that their hand happened to flow there naturally. There is a tangent in this panel that caught my attention, but maybe I'm the only one. Maybe I'm, again, overthinking it because that's what I do here. It's my job. Do you see it? I'll give you a couple seconds. Here, I'll just show you. Look how Vitalstatistix's head fits so neatly into the window behind him. It's hard to figure out if that's a bad tangent or an attempt at framing his head that just went a step too far, or maybe not far enough in this case. At first glance, it looked to me like there's a frame in front of his head until I realized that the bottom part of it wasn't there. Then it just feels like a vice clamp is squeezing on his head if you look at this too long. But if they had drawn the window a little bigger, it wouldn't have made sense because it would have taken up the whole wall, and that's not how it really was. I guess the other option is to not draw the background, and I would not like that. I still like the panel. That window seemed a little bit weird to me. But also keep in mind that the village wasn't fully fleshed out at this point. We didn't have all that many regular characters yet. This hadn't turned into The Simpsons. And actually, it never really does. There are always plenty of background characters in village scenes who are never given names or personalities. But in these early volumes particularly, that was most of the scenes. Even Fully Automatics, for example, didn't reach his final form until Asterix and the Normans, which is volume 9. He was in the first couple books, but didn't do much there and kind of looked completely different. Unhygienics doesn't appear until volume 14 either. That's Asterix in Spain. We move now to panel 3, where the first thing you may notice, and you knew I would notice it, is that everyone is standing on the ground line running parallel just a hair above the bottom border of the panel. This was also true, by the way, of the previous panel, and, artfully so. And I'm just noticing now, looking at these two panels, that when you put them side by side, it kind of looks like a camera is moving to the right and maybe back a little bit to get that new angle in the second panel there. And that's why the big panel you see on the screen here is a little different in that everyone is not at the same distance from the reader, yet they still stand on the same line. The scene recedes back into the frame from right to left, off to the break in the village fence back there. And once again, as we saw earlier on page 1, that break in the fence neatly frames something. In this case, it's Cassius Ceramix and his entourage making their grand entrance, whereas last time it was Asterix and Obelix coming in. And here's our best look at the new character Impedimenta, who looks very different from her final design that we get used to over the years. Fun fact, she doesn't get her name until Asterix and the Chieftain's Shield, which is volume 11, so we're still a few books away from that. And there you go, you also get your Cacophonix gag related to the sound the procession is making on their way in. And I bet you're expecting me now to plumb the depths of Wikipedia to bring you a bit of history on ancient Rome and the use of horns in village processionals, aren't you? Okay, fine, I wouldn't want to disappoint you. Let's get right to it. Folks of this time period did use various horns for various reasons, but for the purposes of this video and these Asterix panels we're talking about today, we're going to talk about two horns in particular. The Carnix and the Cornu. Both were used in part to communicate with troops, often to signal their movements, when they should move, when they should stop, etc. Remember, they didn't have phones or walkie-talkies or anything like that to communicate back then. They sent signals with loud horns, often because they were already making lots of noise while on the march with all those thousands of feet marching together, the armor clanking around, the sandals slapping, the horses clip-clopping, etc. Think of it this way. Ever go to another city and take a group tour and not hear a word the tour guide said because you fell to the back of the group? Imagine that, but you're a Roman or a Celtic soldier and there's hundreds or thousands of you marching together. But with a loud enough and, as we'll soon see, a directional enough horn, you can communicate to the masses even in the far back. The Romans had the cornu, this large G-shaped thing that was a 3-meter stretch of tubing that looks like something Gaston Lagaffe would have devised instead of doing his work. It was easy to carry and versatile. It was also used for ceremonial purposes and at gladiator games. Cornu is a Latin word meaning horn. Makes sense, right? So we're being very literal in our translation here. And yes, that forms the root word of the larger word cornucopia, meaning horn of plenty. And no, I'm not taking a position on that whole fruit of the loom kerfuffle. Google it if you don't know what I'm talking about. I was half tempted to go dig up my DVD copy of Gladiator to see if there are any examples of it in use there, but then I found this. For Gladiator 2, the movie, they found a British musical archaeologist who had a cornu handy. So just think for a second, you send your kid to college, they probably, unfortunately, majored in music, and as a parent you're thinking, they're going to be broke the rest of their life. But maybe they turn into a musical archaeologist in Britain. Then they'll be quoted in an article and featured on a YouTube video about Asterix. Now that $200,000 in debt is well worth it. Sorry, I have a teenager at home. In any case, the cornu model came from the ruins of Pompeii, where multiple cornua, and that's the proper pluralization, not cornus, but cornua, were found perfectly preserved. The Celts, on the other hand, had the carnix, which is this periscope-looking thing. It's built that way because it can carry sounds further over the heads of the fierce Celtic warriors. It was also devised to sound more intimidating, because that thing could really shriek. The carnix also had an animal head at the end of it, while the Roman cornu just had a flared opening at the end of the pipe. And which fierce animal did the carnix adopt? They did use a few different animals, but the most popular fierce animal at the end of that horn seems to have been a boar. Perhaps Obelix was busy designing them, I don't know. Now, there are several videos here on YouTube showing people playing both of these instruments based on recreations they've made, and they're worth watching to help give you that feeling of really being there. It's the funny thing about history is that we can read all about it, but we don't often hear ancient history especially, you know? In fact, we don't even really see ancient history. So much of it is made up or is recreations or is a shadow of its former self. You know, how the statues were fully painted and colorful, and now we think of them as being these stone, plain, black and white statues. But there's a lot of ancient history we'll never know about, but we can bring a little bit of it here because we've been able to recreate these instruments, which is pretty interesting. I'll leave a link in the show notes to this video for a quick pair of videos where you can listen to the cornu and the carnix and decide if they would scare you or just lead you on to victory. Now, we take a tangent from that tangent for a moment, but I promise we'll circle back around. This is a picture I took at Caesar's Casino in Atlantic City, New Jersey. This is the statue of Augustus Caesar. Now, as a fellow augie, I had to get a good picture of this one. It's a copy of a very famous statue made of Augustus Caesar called the Augustus of Prima Porta. It was supposedly commissioned by Augustus's stepson Tiberius. Now, the statue has a whole history unto itself. We're just going to focus on some design aspects of it for now. And there are things I didn't notice standing a little further away from the statue, but I read about, and they're pretty interesting. There's a lot of interesting things going on in this video, I'm sorry. Check out that vest. It's a very detailed, very political vest. Everything on it means something. That includes, under one arm, a Gallic woman, unarmed, carrying a carnix, symbolizing one of the people the Romans had conquered. Her carnix had a dragon head, though, but there was a wild boar also pictured alongside her on the armor just by her feet there, just to really sell that this was a Gallic woman, I suppose, because Gauls do so love their boars. I just don't know how Augustus could have claimed to have subjugated the Gauls, though, when that one village in the north of France remained resolute against him, as they had against his great uncle Julius. And when I say Uncle Julius, I feel like I'm referencing Groucho Marx, and so now I've tied this back to vaudeville as well, which is another full circle because I've mentioned that René Goscinny's sense of humor and a lot of his writing in Asterix over the books reminds me of a very vaudevillian type of humor. We'll talk about that more on page 14. Also, these are without a doubt my two favorite Juliuses or Julii of all time. Yes, even more so than Orange Julius or Dr. J. Julius Irving, the basketball player whose every picture on the internet requires a license, so you won't see him here. But there is a statue of him up in front of the 76ers Stadium in Philadelphia, and yes, I said 76, not 6, never mind. And that left hand in Atlantic City is holding on to something. Now, we don't know what the hand in the original sculpture was actually holding. That detail has been lost, unfortunately, to the mists of time, but there was something in that hand at one point. One popular theory is that it was a pilum, a spear weapon we covered in great detail on page 8 of Page by Page by Toutatis. So there, another callback. Check out, at the end of this video, I'll link you to the entire playlist of all these videos, and you can work your way through it. In the show notes for this video, I'll also leave another link to the article that has a great breakdown of this statue from its history to all the details on the vest. It's a fun read and has a good sense of humor, so definitely worth a read. Thus endeth our tangent. Farewell to thee, my fellow augie. Naturally, Cacophonix reacts positively to the shrill noise coming from the carnix and or the cornu or whichever one it was. Of course, Asterix is standing next to him with his hands over his ears and complaining about the sound. You need both of those characters together in the same panel to really pull that gag off. And then the two chiefs meet. Cassius has the grand gesture, locked into a commanding pose with a straight arm salute, though with his wrist bent up to show an open palm. Vitalstatistix gives a weaker salute and watcher. And here is one of those places where I vastly prefer the British translation. Not that I'd expect an American translator to come up with the same word as the British translators used here, but I just like the sound of watcher so much better. It's that understated British nonchalance that sells the line in a way that a mere hello could never do. Unless maybe it had a certain sing-song quality, and I'm not going to attempt to sing here for you. I'm not even sure that there is an American English word you could put into that balloon to sell the same joke here. I don't think "what's up" would work, or "hey, hi, howdy," or anything like that. Watcher just rings so perfectly in my ears, but again, I'm a total sucker for British comedy, so I'm a sucker for this one. Also, I like the Roman Ave in there, if only because it adds to the Romanness of Cassius Ceramix. Having it translated to hail doesn't quite work the same way. So this is the first meeting of the two chieftains, and the first thing that's obvious is that Cassius Ceramix absolutely towers physically over Vitalstatistix. And he's in such better shape, too. His guys might be having as much trouble carrying him as Vitalstatistix's men, too, but that's because Ceramix is a tall dude with lots of muscles. Vitalstatistix is, pear-shaped, I guess? When you look at them in profile like this, they're almost polar opposites. Ceramix's chest sticks out just as much as Vitalstatistix's gut does. From a silhouette point of view, they're very complementary, almost the yin and yang. By the way, quick side note. Using Vitalstatistix's name with the possessive apostrophe S at the end is almost impossible to say, and I've had to say it a lot in this video. Please, thumbs up if you're enjoying the video. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Thank you. In the next panel, Uderzo emphasizes the size even more. Ceramix barely fits in this panel. He's filling nearly the whole panel with his barrel chest. His head is almost compressed into his shoulders to fit inside the panel. And the dialogue matches that with a reference to this being a summit conference, because summit, heights, get it? And yes, that's a pretty direct translation from Goscinny's original script. And at last, in the next panel, the moment has arrived, the axe has been thrown, the gloves are off, etc., etc. This is when Cassius Ceramix officially makes it official and says, "I am challenging you to single combat." This is an important moment in the book, so let's stop and take a look at the translations at work here. The French is literally, "I'm here to challenge you, a challenge for the battle of the chiefs." The word chefs in French is the same as, boss or chief, leader. Goscinny's script hits the title of the book right there at the end of the line, Le Combat des Chefs. And again, apologies for my French accent. It's the title of the book. You should include it in the dialogue somewhere. It's just good writing. Some people find it corny. I think it's great. Like that time Robert Kirkman included a 2-page spread for Charlie Adler to draw so that Rick Grimes could proclaim that we are the Walking Dead. The British get a little more flowery with the first line. "I have come to throw down the gauntlet. I am challenging you to single combat." This sounds a little more formal. No contractions, complete sentences, and it goes nowhere near the title of the book, which is just a loss, to be honest. Compare that to the Paper Cuts American version. "I've come to challenge you, a challenge to the combat of chiefs." The contraction feels a little less formal. The second sentence isn't really a sentence, but continues the first one. It works well together. And most importantly, it includes the title of the book right there in the dialogue, which is unfortunately only ruined by the fact that the English language edition of this book has always been titled The Big Fight, and not the literal translation, The Combat of Chiefs. So close. My first thought when reading this panel was, that's an odd time for a close-up. I'd expect more of a wider shot with reactions involved. Ceramix on the left, and Asterix and Vitalstatistix on the right, gasping in horror. Again, as with the Walking Dead example, it's another close-up. By the way, sorry for the spoiler, but if you haven't read The Walking Dead number 24 by now, I don't know what to tell you anymore. Two possibilities here. One, this is a moment that you want the reader to focus in on. You want to be just listening to what he says here. It's a big moment in the story, and it's all Cassius Ceramix's. It's the turning point of the entire book. The plan is laid bare here, and the rest of the story will be a reaction to this particular panel. It deserves to be isolated and read on its own in purity and strictness with nothing else to get in your way. Or two, there just wasn't enough room in this tier of panels to have a bigger panel with a wider angle. You needed the 2-shot to start the tier. The second panel is a full body shot, and the last panel is just getting squeezed in there. It's almost like Uderzo is pushing his camera in from a semi-wide shot closer to Cassius Ceramix, super close up on Cassius Ceramix, just in time for his proclamation, and that works as well. Either way, Goscinny and Uderzo make up for it in the next panel with the reaction shot. And I love the angle on this one too. It's a high shot pointing down and focusing on basically just the two, Vitalstatistix and Asterix. You can't see Vitalstatistix's face yet, but the body language with the shaking hands and the spun head turning give away that it's definitely worrying to them. They're looking at each other like, what? What are we in for here? The rest of the panels on this page were all medium shots at eyes height or lower, and this shot really stands out, just because the point of view is coming down from on high. You have to go back a couple of pages to see another shot just like it. The closest one that may count is this one from page 11, but that's questionable. You can see over the heads of the kids, but that's probably mostly because they're, shorter than Cassius Ceramix and that Roman soldier there next to him. Page 10 had a few down-angle shots also, including these two here. That last one in the bottom right corner reminds me the most of the layout of this panel from page 13. The point is, Uderzo was a great storyteller. He wanted to lay things out in the straightest, most direct possible way. He didn't use too many flashy angles or exaggerated ones. Rare are the full page splashes, so when he does use a bird's eye point of view, or even a worm's eye point of view, it stands out more and it's worth thinking about why he would do such a thing. And then in the final panel of page 13, Cassius Ceramix drives things home, hulking over Vitalstatistix now, who already looks like a cat caught in a corner, unsure of what to say or do next as he realizes doom is running straight at him. Ceramix has the thumbs down thing going, which I'll save my research for on another time. You've already suffered enough today through my horns. You can go back to an earlier page, I forget which one, to see what I had to say about the origins of the straight arm salute also, so please take a look at the end of the video of the whole playlist. You'll find it in there. But if you look at this panel just right, you see it has a bit of a triangular composition. If we've learned nothing from Frank Frazetta, it's that triangles make great compositions. There's also a great bit of depth added to the page with the array of men carrying the two chieftains lined up along the bottom. Look how they start much larger at the right and get smaller as you go deeper into the panel on the left, where just that last guy's head is visible in the lower left corner there. It's like a secondary triangle in a panel that's already a triangular formation. I doubt Uderzo did that on purpose. He probably wasn't saying, today I'm going to do a double triangle composition. I think he probably, at this point, even only 6 books in, plus all the other work he had done with Oompa Oompa and Michel and Tongai, however you pronounce that one, he just has a natural sense of storytelling about him. He just can make these panels work. Oh, and the Calends reference there in the dialogue refers to the first of the month, which is spelled out directly in the Paper Cuts American edition of the book, where they put the annotations at the bottom of the page, which is the best addition to the English canon of Asterix in the last 50 years. Let's quickly run through a couple of differences between British and American editions here. This panel we looked at before in French versus British, but we take a look now at the differences between British and American, summit conferences versus high-level meeting. I prefer the American translation here. Is summit conference a British thing? It's a bit of an awkward phrase to my ears, so I'm not really familiar with it. The high-level meeting makes more sense to me. When I think summit conference, I guess it's more of a political thing, kind of like, when Reagan met Gorbachev at Reykjavik or something, that kind of summit. It's only as I'm recording this now that I'm thinking back to that kind of summit idea. But to me, a high-level meeting is more common and day-to-day kind of thing. Or just let me know in the comments if we're being two people separated by a common language again here. That happens. I have generally no opinion on the differences in this last balloon, but I do pick the British edition for a reason. They're almost word for word the same, but the phrases have just been shuffled around a little bit. I was going to give demerits to the American translation for avoiding the word loser, but that word shows up in the very next panel at the top of the next page, so this isn't one of those things where they're protecting children from naughty language or anything. That was my first guess. The defeated one's tribe, quote-unquote, is a bit of a mouthful, but maybe Joe Johnson was just trying not to repeat himself by using loser on this page and loser again this next panel, so I don't know. I'm still going to give the point here to the British edition just for being a little bit clearer. So that's a 1-1 tie in the translation contest between American and British editions this time out. But the tiebreaker, of course, goes to the Watcher panel, so the Brits win this one. Cheers, mates. Shtick. Pure 100% shtick. And oh, how I love that stuff. There are twists, and there are turns, and then there's more turning, and then there's a plot twist. Page 14 is going to be a fun one. If you enjoyed this page from Asterix and the Big Fight, please like this video too. Thumbs up, subscribe, all that good stuff. My ego appreciates it. YouTube loves you for it. Everyone goes home happy. For reviews of every Asterix book, check out the Asterix Agenda over at pipelinecomics.com, or click on these suggested videos and video playlists for more Asterix fun and games. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next page.